you a woman in medicine feeling overwhelmed and disconnected from the personal fulfillment that you desire? You're in the right place. Join doctors Joanne and Aaron as they rewrite the rules for women in medicine. Let's begin.
Welcome to this episode of Create Meaning in Medicine. I'm so excited to be here with Dr. Joanne Sotelo. And we've been talking with you over the last several episodes as we wrapped up the prior year and as we enter this new year, talking about reflecting and also on creating new habits, including our episode with Rod Stanley on getting more physically active and adding movement to your habits, and also on improving our sleep. But one of the things that can get in our way with creating new habits is getting stuck in a rut. And I've talked about being stuck in a rut for 2 decades before I started working with a coach and getting unstuck. And I didn't even know I was stuck. And so today with Dr. Joanne Sotelo, we're going to unpack about getting unstuck so you can even start moving forward. Joanne, I'm so excited to talk about this topic with you today. And I want to hear your perspective. Like, what does it even mean to be stuck?
Thank you, Erin. This is such an important topic because it's what gets in our way. So often we talk about goals, we talk about habits, we talk about dreaming big, envisioning, all those good things that we've been talking about in the last episodes, yet we don't always recognize what gets in our way. And sometimes it is ourselves, our beliefs, and getting stuck. But you're right, it seems like a vague thing of what does that even mean, getting stuck? And it's something that I deal with patients too. As a psychiatrist, I hear it a lot. And then also when I am coaching the women in medicine, unfortunately, I hear that phrase a lot of being stuck. So I would start by saying, pause now and think about it for yourself. What does it mean to you to get stuck? Because sometimes it's very obvious. Like, for example, if we talk about that you have a goal for releasing weight and then you've been doing your diet, you've been moving, and the scale number doesn't change. That's an obvious way to kind of see, okay, I guess I'm stuck, right? And if we're thinking about goals in that sense. But when it's something that's more vague, like if you're thinking, I want to feel more fulfilled, I want to have better relationships, I want to be a little bit more efficient at work. We don't always know because sometimes other emotions get in our way. We might feel frustrated, we might feel irritated, we might feel overwhelmed, and it could all be either the cause or the symptom of being stuck. So I know that I rambled here a little bit because it is very unique in how you feel stuck. And I've learned to recognize it for myself, actually, because I feel overwhelmed. And that's kind of my red flag of when I know that I'm not moving forward in the way that I want. And that by itself could be a good definition. When you're not getting the results that you want, when you're not moving forward at the speed that you want, you might be stuck in some way or another, whether it's concretely or in your mindset.
And I love that example that you provided because I was going to ask you, how can we get better at even recognizing when we're stuck? I heard you say overwhelm tends to be a red flag for you. Are there other common red flags that you see amongst your colleagues or the women that you coach in medicine? Or is it more of a mindset on how to be more maybe self-reflective in order to see where we might be getting stuck?
I hear a lot that when I ask for how things have been going, what results have they been getting based on whatever goals they've been working on, and then the answer is, I haven't done anything or I haven't moved forward enough. And then we can look back and there's usually some progress, but because there's some blocks along the way, there's that sense of I am not moving forward. Sometimes it is also based on what are the expectations, right? Like we can dissect this in so many ways, or our own perfectionism of what it means to move forward, which is the other side of the coin of how do we define the steps forward, and the what's the time frame that we're going to give ourselves to reach a goal, or in general. Again, it doesn't necessarily need to be about reaching a specific goal.
And I'm going to put a little twist on that. One of the things I love doing as a coach is flipping perspective. And so, for example, sharing with someone how what they perceive as a weakness might, in some ways, be a strength. And when we talk about getting stuck, I also think sometimes we might think we're stuck. And yet, when you look back, you see, oh, I really have come a long ways. And I love that as a coach to be able to say to my clients, do you remember 3 months ago, 6 months ago, when we had this conversation? And do you see how much growth you've made? And that reflecting back, which we oftentimes don't do often enough in medicine, I think can help us also ask, am I really stuck? Or maybe, as you said, when we put time frames, maybe you put an unrealistic time frame on yourself. And if you look back, you go, oh, based on my circumstances, my unique circumstances, I actually did make the amount of progress that was even possible during those times. And looking at it with a little bit of grace and maybe getting other people's perspective, which can sometimes help clarify your own.
Yes, and that makes me think of, actually, just this morning I was in a coaching call with one of the women physician I coach, and she's been doing some really good forward movement in a big project that she has. And I was telling her how she felt. I was asking her how she felt about it, and then I was asking her, imagine that it's December of 2025 and we're having this conversation, and you're telling me that you had a great year. What did you achieve? How did it feel? And then let's architect backwards. And then I also then said, because I've been working with her for a while, of I remember how it was a year ago. We can actually do this exercise of then thinking, tell me where you are now compared to where you were a year ago. And then it was like, oh wow, yes, I've made so many forward movements and big and small leaps that allowed you to move forward. But if I just ask her straightforward, she probably would say that she feels stuck often. Right. So it's a good, I think it's part of some of the things that we struggle with also as women in medicine, because we have this expectation and perfectionism and the comparisons and some problems in confidence that sometimes get in our way of the awareness, and we need to be fair with ourselves and have that self-compassion that I love talking about.
Yeah, I had a similar experience in my last group coaching call of 2024 when I asked them, the group members, to reflect on what they'd seen in each other.
Mm.
And they were bringing up growth in the other group members that the individual had completely forgotten about or written off as not significant. And it was a really powerful time. And I got all these wide eyed expressions like, oh, wow. I did do that, didn't I? And I had totally forgotten about that. Thank you for the reminder. And that celebration, that reminder to celebrate sometimes the crumbs of the wins and sometimes the big wins. And that might take leaning on your community, which you and I have talked so much about, to get curious. If you're feeling stuck, maybe ask around of your friends, colleagues, your coach, your mentor, your therapist, whoever you might be interacting, your siblings, and ask them, do you think, what do you think about my progress in this area? And you might be surprised that you're less stuck than you thought. And Joanne, I would love to hear how, what your reflections are, and why is it so important, especially for women in medicine, to recognize areas where they're stuck, and how are they maybe different than the general population?
Yes, and it's important to recognize why do we get stuck in general, because it goes back to what we talk in this podcast so often in terms of clarity. We have to be very clear of what we want in alignment with our values and the season of our lives, because that's the it's the analogy that we've used too of a GPS, that we have to give it a precise direction of where to go and where we are so that it can give us instructions and then pivot if necessary, if there's traffic or a block in the way, talking about getting stuck. But we need to have that clarity, and often we don't, or we think we do, which is almost worse, when we think that we do and then we don't, because then it's again, it's like we just wrote the town instead of a specific direction. It sort of gives us an idea, we're close, but then we'll reach different blocks along the way and we won't even know it. And then that leads to a lot of the stress and the overwhelm, not knowing what help we need, not knowing how to protect our time and set boundaries. So that's a lot of the reasons why we get stuck. And then also what we mentioned of the external expectations. And then, particularly for us women in medicine, we have so much of the internal expectations, the dual roles of being a caretaker at work and then coming home to take care of the family and all those circumstances. We obviously have more of the perfectionism that we talk in here. So those are some of the kind of more obvious reasons. But then, of course, some of the things that we love talking about in this podcast, some of the other things are our beliefs about ourselves. Do we believe that we can reach that? Or do we have that negative self talk of, you might get excited about something and then it gets a little bit hard, and then your brain goes, well, that's too hard. You shouldn't do that. Or you're not going to be able to, right? Like we've had an episode about limiting beliefs, so it's a good one to think about here. And that's very important because that's more about the language that we use to talk about to ourselves, some of the beliefs that we have about ourselves and about what we want. And that psychological, mental, emotional component of overall what we want, and how then that definitely gets in the way of getting us stuck.
And that talking about language, and I've heard several times in my listening to meditations and audibles this past week, that saying, I think it was by Henry Ford, about whether you can or you can't. How does that go?
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
It's
You know,
something
you're in
like,
determination of, if
uh-huh.
you tell yourself you can do it, then you can. And if you tell yourself you can't do it, you can't. And so you're the power of that language. And so also I was thinking, if you tell yourself, I'm so stuck, in reality, you're really not. Or is there a different term or a different language that you could substitute for being stuck? I'm on a journey. I'm not going as fast as I wanted to, but I can intervene. So we're oftentimes talking about how can we substitute different thoughts in order to drive our outcomes, because oftentimes our thoughts will win out.
Yeah. And I love that. And, like going back to some of the things that we talked about for women in medicine, that we talk about our level of overwhelm and depression, anxiety, burnout, all of that gets better when we have that clarity and we're taking the necessary steps at an rate that's reasonable versus the high expectations that we have. And then that contributes to us feeling like we're not doing it well, or, the that we're not moving forward. In addition to also our leadership as women in medicine and role modeling, it's so important for us to be clear about our forward movement. And getting stuck is appropriate, I believe, when we have, especially if we have big things. It's more about being able to recognize it and have those red flags for ourselves to know, like, right, like I'm hitting, is this like a yield sign, is this like a stop sign, like, is this a red light, when do I move forward, and recognizing all those things for ourselves.
I love those references to roadmaps. And, you've talked about how to recognize when we're stuck, reasons why we get stuck, and including lack of clarity in where we're supposed to go, being precise, and the power of our internal expectations and the power of our language and our beliefs. And I know that you always have different frameworks about what can we actually do about being stuck or when we think we're stuck. What are some actions that might work for our listener that they can implement?
Yes, I have a 5-step formula here to get unstuck, or at least a good framework for you to start thinking about it. And if you've been listening to our podcast, you can almost guess what the first one is going to be, or a good idea. So the first one is that awareness, acknowledge and reflect. And so we first need to know that we are getting stuck, which is why we started the podcast saying you need to define that sense of stuckness to make up a word for yourself. And then you acknowledge and reflect and then say, is it appropriate? Is it something internal or something external? Do I need to slow down? Do I need to ask for help? Do I need to get more clarity? Do I need to reset the expectations? Right? You almost have to ask yourself all those questions again. But that's where we start in recognizing, and of course, always with compassion, never with judgment. It's a lot of compassion. Oh, this is part of the process. It means that I am moving, right? Like if it's I hadn't thought about that, but it's almost a good sign because it means that you are moving forward towards something, and that there's some kind of discomfort that might be getting in the way, and recognizing it will allow you to then do something about it.
Love that. And that awareness is so key in anything we want to change. So, love starting
Yes.
with that. What's next?
Okay, the second one, again, we get clear about your vision and your goals. And that's like Erin started the podcast. That's what we've been talking about a lot in this last episode. So if you haven't listened to those, take the time to listen because we talked a lot about visioning, and I'm making up words today. Vision of your future, setting goals, all those things that are so important. And it's worth the time to sit down and ask yourself, are those things that I set up January 1st, are those still the same things I want to do for the rest of the year? Is that what's really important? Is that what I want to protect time for? And then you get really, really focused, right? That's how we keep on moving forward. Then the third one, which is I mentioned earlier, we challenge the limiting beliefs. Again, when we have that awareness and we're clear about what we want and where we want to go, then when we can ask ourselves, how am I thinking about this? What are my beliefs about it? Are they positive? Are they negative? And like Erin was mentioning earlier, we challenge the thoughts if needed. We reframe them. And then we give them a little bit of a twist so they serve us, so they allow us to move forward. And then it's more of a belief that empowers you rather than a belief that limits you and gets in the way. Then
Love that.
the fourth one, then again, after you have the awareness, you get clarity, you challenge your own beliefs, then we have to take bold actions that are aligned with all those things that we want. And, we say bold, and by bold, it doesn't always mean a gigantic step. It's sometimes the courage to take that first step, whether it's big or it's small. Because with the movement, that's where we will actually get momentum that will give you that forward movement, that will give you the courage and the confidence to keep on going. It's, like when you're pushing a very heavy boulder and it doesn't move, but you know that you're adding that energy and then it starts going. That's how it is at the beginning. And that's what's going to propel you forward. And that's definitely what will get you unstuck. And then the
Love that.
last one, which we love, and it's part of what we're here for, you seek support and you ask for help. You get a buddy, an accountability buddy, you get a coach, and you have someone really help you through the process, even if you're just kind of talking about it. And then always, always, always with self compassion and celebration along the way. So that's the 5 steps here to get unstuck.
I love the themes. And so, if you've been listening to us for a while, you will have heard the theme of asking for help, not when you're at your wits' end, but sooner, more often. and the power of community, seeking support. We in medicine are so taught to be silos, to be independent, to be able to figure things out. And yet sometimes that can be to a fault. And so I love that seeking support, seeking even collaboration, and that accountability for us. It can be so difficult when we try to do it on our own. We don't even have the energy to do it on our own. But if we have an accountability partner to help pick us up and move us forward, to help us lift the weight of that heavy boulder, then that change can seem so much less onerous or overwhelming. And so, Joanne, you've talked to us about recognizing when we're stuck, about why we get stuck, and why it's important for women in medicine to recognize when they're stuck, the power of clarity. And I love bold actions, and also that 5-step process to help us get unstuck. And as we think about how can we raise our own awareness and take these tools with us, I wonder, is there one other piece of advice that you'd like to share with our listener to help them on this journey?
What comes to mind, it's something that's personal. I share that I know that I'm stuck because I start feeling overwhelmed. And I've learned to give myself 2 outs of it. I'll First of all, I'm like very compassionate, like, okay, what's going on? You're stuck, you're overwhelmed, but that doesn't mean that you cannot move forward. So that's one thing. Give myself a little bit of a break, and then I said, okay, let's go. So I do one of two things. I either do like a big one, like a big step. It's like what we call frogs. I have to remember what book that's from. Like Eat the Frog, meaning the like you do that one thing that's making you a little bit anxious, or that it's going to liberate a lot of the emotional mental energy. Or usually if I'm feeling a little bit worse, I just do something. We hear so much in personal development to do the next right thing in alignment. But it sometimes could be, I am going to pay some bills. It might not necessarily be related to the thing that I'm thinking of, that I'm feeling stuck. I just want to give myself a win so that like I get the motors going. I get that momentum. I make myself feel better. I change my emotional state. And then that allows me to keep on moving forward. So that's kind of my little formula on the side, but maybe you can apply it to how it would make sense to you, so that we keep on moving forward, because that's what we're here for growth, for development, to get ourselves to that next level that we want to get to.
I love that so much, because it really helps us get out of what we can oftentimes get into, that victim mode when we're feeling stuck. Oh, poor me. And you're like, oh no, you have control. You can do something big, or you can do something really small. You have the power to make changes within yourself. You don't need to rely on anyone but you. So powerful. I love that message, Joanne. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on recognizing when we're stuck in a rut and how we can successfully get out of it. And with that, I can't wait for you to join us on our next episode, where we're going to be sharing about hopes and beliefs as we get started on this new year. And if you haven't yet helped us get in front of a bigger audience, at the time of this recording, we have reached almost 18,000 downloads from across the country and around the world. And if you want to see these messages get in front of more people, you can really help us by going to the Rate This Podcast on the show page on your favorite listening platform. And also, if you give us not only a rating, but a review, and let us know what you would like to see more of and how we can serve you better. We look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Stay tuned.
Do you want exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with us? Then visit createmeaninginmedicine.com now, where you'll dive deeper into how you can create meaning in medicine. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Connect with us on the website and tune in to the next episode.